The Nikola Vucevic trade hurts the Chicago Bulls again. Oh my goodness. Y'all know we're going to talk about it, break it down, but you gotta hear the music first.
Cognac. Gang.
Shy Boys Podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's daily episode. If you tuned in, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell as well. Now, look, the Nikola Vucevic trade hurts the Chicago Bulls again. It hurts the Chicago Bulls again. During the tenure after the Chicago Bulls traded for Nikola Vucevic, the Chicago Bulls during their time has only had one playoff appearance, in which that playoff appearance versus the Milwaukee Bucks, the Chicago Bulls was able to only garner one game versus the Milwaukee Bucks. And what it looks like for the Orlando Magic appear to be set up for the foreseeable future. And it hurts the Chicago Bulls again. The Chicago Bulls, during their time since trading for Nikola Vucevic, has only seen the playoffs one time. They have been participants of the play-in 2 times. And in both of those play-in appearances, they dropped the ball and end up getting sent home and ending their season earlier than what was expected from the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls traded Nikola Vucevic for 2 first-round picks, and those 2 first-round picks end up turning into Franz Wagner, Jet Howard, and a number of things to help push the Orlando Magic into new heights. And for the Chicago Bulls, we stuck in the mud right now. That's why this trade hurts the Chicago Bulls again, because the Chicago Bulls come to the drawing table. They come to the table to make dinner, and that dinner is incomplete. They came with some steak, some eggs, or some steak, some mashed potatoes, and the meal is not complete. Hence why the Chicago Bulls have found themselves in another terrible position to where these guys have been sent home, while the Orlando Magic, though they have been sent home, they found themselves in a Game 7 in the NBA playoffs. And the season and their future is looking very, very bright compared to the Chicago Bulls. Now, the Chicago Bulls, when you talk about the Orlando Magic and what they was able to do for everything we want to see for the Chicago Bulls, the Orlando Magic has done that. The Orlando Magic has went out there and got themselves a young, talented team with the potential of having a young superstar in Paolo Banchero, while the Chicago Bulls don't even know which route they want to go. While the Chicago Bulls found themselves stuck in the mud yet again. While the Chicago Bulls don't even know who their next young star is going to be. We have a lot of young promising players. You got your Kobe Whites. You got your Ayo Dosunmus. You got your Dalen Terrys, your Julian Phillips, your Patrick Williams, your Orlot Batims. But at the end of the day, a lot of these players still leave a bunch of question marks on the docket for the Chicago Bulls, while the Orlando Magic know exactly. They know exactly on what they're going to do and know who they have to depend on for the foreseeable future. I imagine the Orlando Magic will go out and continue to improve their team. They will look towards other players, but at least for the sake of this discussion, the Orlando Magic absolutely know that they have a Paolo, that they have a Franz Wagner, that they have a Mo Wagner, that they have a Wendell Carter Jr. who was traded for Nikola Vucevic, who I believe Nikola Vucevic is still better than, but at the end of the day, you're still going to get a longer runway out of Wendell Carter Jr.'s versus a Nikola Vucevic because of his age. Nikola Vucevic is somebody that I brought to the table, and I'm like, hey, you got to get this guy up out of here. With the Orlando Magic, Wendell Carter Jr. seems like he can stick around just a little bit longer. The Orlando Magic in this playoffs forced themselves into a Game 7 versus the Cleveland Cavaliers in these playoffs, while the Chicago Bulls couldn't force anything to see themselves within these playoffs. The Orlando Magic continuously finds themselves in a great position with having these young, talented players. The young, talented players are right there for the taking. These guys seem like they have built something sustainable to push themselves forward for the foreseeable future. You got yourself Apollo. You got yourself Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, a bevy of young players that the Orlando Magic can depend on while the Chicago Bulls are still searching for answers. And when we talk about what the future looks like for both franchises, we looking at the Chicago Bulls and we're kind of scratching our heads with this and trying to figure it out. Why the Orlando Magic seem like they have in mind on what they want to do, have in mind of how they're going to push for the foreseeable future, and have in mind on what their team is going to look like moving forward. I don't see these guys, at least when you talk about both teams, I don't see the Orlando Magic struggling with who their next superstar player is going to be. While the Chicago Bulls, we might look at Kobe White, we might look at Ayo Dosunmu, we might look at a Dalen Terry and say, hey, these young guys are promising. But who's the next superstar that's coming out of our young talent pool for the Chicago Bulls to help push this thing forward? It's still a question mark. Why do Orlando Magic have that figured out? They've realized that their young budding superstar is going to be Paolo. Why the Chicago Bulls is hoping that Kobe White can take a step forward. Why the Chicago Bulls are hoping that Ayo Dosunmu can take a step forward. These young players have taken step forwards. Don't get me wrong, but they still need to take steps further to help push this thing into new heights, while the Orlando Magic seem like they are in a prime position to be contenders very, very soon. And at least for right now, for the sake of discussion, we know that the Orlando Magic right now, when we discuss them, they are a playoff team this season, which they were next season and years to come. So that's something that we have to continuously discuss, because right now the Chicago Bulls appear to be stuck in the mud, while the Orlando Magic seem like they're starting to gain some traction. Why the Orlando Magic seem like they're starting to figure this thing out. They figured out their coaching situation. They figured out their young players and who's going to be contributors in the future to help push this thing forward, while the Chicago Bulls are still searching for a bevy of answers. Right now, we're looking at a situation to where the Nikola Vucevic trade hurts the Chicago Bulls again. It hurts the Chicago Bulls again. And the reason it hurts them again is because since Nikola Vucevic got here, the Chicago Bulls have only been in the playoffs one time. And in that playoff series versus the Milwaukee Bucks, the Chicago Bulls have only seen one victory come out of that within a 7-game series, and the Chicago Bulls got their ass sent home in 5. While the Orlando Magic were able to put on for their respective city, to put on for their hometown, to put on for their fans, and be able to push for a game 7 to where the Chicago Bulls were only able to get one playoff victory, while the Orlando Magic in just one playoff run were able to get 3 victories. So right now, when we're looking at who's balancing and who's moving in a direction and who's competing at a higher level, you're looking at the Orlando Magic in a different light compared to the Chicago Bulls. So the Nikola Vucevic trade hurts the Chicago Bulls again in that regard. Now, the Chicago Bulls after going out and getting Nikola Vucevic, they went ahead and re-signed this man again. And as of right now, after 1 year of being locked in that deal for Nikola Vucevic, the Chicago Bulls appear to be a team that has given out a bad deal. I don't know what Nikola Vucevic is going to come out looking like the following season, this next upcoming season, the 2020-2025 season. I don't know what Nikola Vucevic is going to look like. But I know that right now, between 2023 and a 2024 season, that Nikola Vucevic has been a huge disappointment. A huge disappointment to the point that I want to either bench Nikola Vucevic or get him out of town. That's my personal opinion. You can agree with it or not. And I'm okay with it if you disagree with it. That's your opinion. But as of right now, we looking at Nikola Vucevic and I'm saying, hey, this is a fella. You absolutely have to discuss what you want to do with him. Because on the offensive side, yes, he's giving you a double-double, but the impact is just not there. You're talking about things that he could do defensively, and we say that he's not horrible. He's not great, but he should be okay defensively. But from the past season, we seen that Nikola Vucevic was absolutely horrendous in certain games. So that's a discussion that the Chicago Bulls front office has to have in order to figure out what direction that they want to go in with this young Chicago Bulls team. Well, not absolutely young, but with the young players that you got, with your Kobe Whites, with your Ayo Dosumus, with your Patrick Williams, with your Julian Phillips, your Dalen Terrys, your Orla Biteams, your Adama Sanogus. What are you going to do with this team to ensure that these young players are in prime position to push this franchise forward to compete with the other teams around the NBA and within the Eastern Conference? That's something that we're gonna have to discuss for a while until the Chicago Bulls show us that they are capable of placing a contending team or at least a playoff team within the NBA, or at least in front of us. Because as of right now, it seems a bit shaky. It seems a bit shaky. For right now, it appears that the Orlando Magic are suited for years and years and years down the road, while the Chicago Bulls are stuck in mud. And that's something that we really have to think about, because the Chicago Bulls, they are within one of the best markets in the NBA, one of the best markets within the United States when it comes to sports wise, but yet the Chicago Bulls seems to be a ass of a team. So we got to come to the drawing table and figure this thing out. I understand that sometimes trades at the moment, and I said this at the moment, you know what I'm saying? Trading Nikola Vucevic for Wendell Carter Jr. is a win. And I believe it still is a win because Wendell Carter Jr. ain't doing much. Let's keep it a buck. But when you talk about the others, when you talk about the Wagners of the world, when you talk about the additions of the other young guys that has came into the Orlando Magic's facility and help this young team strategize and become better and become a team that is playoff valuable, it's a different discussion when you reflect back on the Chicago Bulls. For the simple fact that you look at the Chicago Bulls and most of us, or if not all of us, are like, what the hell are the Chicago Bulls doing? Where are we going with this? How are we going to make a team into being a young, athletic, inspiring, explosive, offensive, or solid defensive team to where we can say our young Bulls, we're going to the playoffs. We don't know what's going to happen in the playoffs, but we're going. Right now, the Bulls don't provide a lot of those answers. Right now, the Orlando Magic looks like they are primed for another playoff appearance next season. In the way that they contended versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, you have to question and think to yourself, like, hey, these guys can only get better. They can go out. They can still keep most of their guys. They can keep the Wagners of the world. They can keep the Jalen Suggs of the world. They can keep your bud and superstar and Paulo Banchero of the world. Why the Chicago Bulls don't have that budding superstar? Why the Chicago Bulls don't have that budding star right now? Why the Chicago Bulls seem to be an old, slow, non-3 shooting team and seems like they're behind the curve when it comes to everything that you need to bring to the table to compete within this NBA. There's a lot of questions for the Chicago Bulls. Why the Orlando Magic seems like they have figured a few things out. I'm not saying that they figured everything out, but they figured some things out to the point to where they are able to ensure that they will be in the playoffs next season, just depending on and reflecting on the season that they had this season. So the Chicago Bulls need to get it together. They need to figure it out. I don't know what AK is going to do. I don't know what Mark Eversley is going to do. But what I do know is what they need to do is pick a direction and go with that direction. That's simple. They need to figure it out. They need to figure out how are we going to mold this team now and ensure that we will be back to the promised land heading years down the road. And look, I don't necessarily believe that you have to go ahead and just automatically become a championship contender, but you definitely need to turn this thing around to the point to where the Chicago Bulls are playoff contenders, are playoff uh 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 a team that's right there within the playoffs to put pressure on the opposing teams who a lot of people will see as being playoff favorites or championship contenders. It steps to this. So what's the next step for the Chicago Bulls? It's to win a playoff series. And you're not doing it with the current construction of this team. That's just what it is. You're not doing it with the current construction of this team. So what are you going to do, AK? What are you going to do, Mark Eversley? Let's get this thing together. Let's figure some things out. Let's figure moves around for Nikola Vucevic, whether that's coming off the bench or being moved to another team. Let's figure out DeMar DeRozan, whether that's re-signing with this team or just letting them walk and using that money to bring on additional talent within this organization. Zach LaVine, get your ass up out of here. I love Zach LaVine and what he can potentially bring to this team, but he wants out. Let's get him out. Let's go ahead and find some pieces for him. Let's figure this thing out because we are stuck in the mud with no direction. While the team that we traded with in the past, the Orlando Magic, have seemed to figure it out, why the Chicago Bulls don't know where they want to go. So y'all let me know all your thoughts down below. Let me know how you feeling about this right now. Because me personally, I believe that this is another shot at the Chicago Bulls and this organization for what they have done this past 3 seasons. The Chicago Bulls and the Nikola Vucevic trade hurts them again. Let me know your thoughts below. Let me know how you're feeling because right now, I'm not feeling too well. I'm looking at it as a complete loss. If you're talking about the short term, the Chicago Bulls won. Maybe. But if you're talking about after that first year that the Chicago Bulls made the playoffs, it has been a consistent failure. It has been a complete failure. We got to get it together. But that's it for me today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for so much for tuning in into another episode of Shy Bulls Podcast. Leave your thoughts in your comments below. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Bobby. I'ma catch y'all on the next one for sure.
Cognac. Gang.